Welcome everybody. Tonight at David Richard Gallery, and I'm David Eichels by the way, we're doing an artist talk for the show Her Story, History, Her Story. And it's a show here in Santa Fe. It's up through July. Hopefully you guys can all make it or at least check it out online. There's a catalog online as well. I'm not going to steal too much of the story about it, but we're going to have a talk tonight featuring 3 of the artists who are here, and these are their works behind us. I'll be out of the way in just momentarily. But so we have Kaylee Spitzer, and her work is over here, the black and white pieces. And Delilah Montoya, most of her work is around the corner, and we have a piece here on this stand for you to see. And then, Laurie Tümer. This piece is right here, and this is actually a very interesting piece. It's a little hard to capture, probably, I'm sure, an image there on film, but it sort of shifts and flickers when you kind of move from one end to the other. So you're not going to be able to see it there because it's going to be standing still, but that's okay. Trust me, take a look at the images. And then we're very fortunate to have Laura Addison with us, and she's going to be hosting tonight and moderating the discussion. And she's a curator at the International Folk Art Museum here in Santa Fe, which is a very major museum anymore. And and they also have a big art fair festival coming up. So you guys, only 35,000 people. So it's kind of amazing. But anyway, with that, I'm going to let Laura take over. And did you have an opening comment?
I just wanted to say welcome on behalf of the New Mexico Women in the Arts. This is our 20th anniversary celebration, and we're thrilled to see you all here tonight. And of course, there's going to be another evening next week, July the 12th, that we encourage you to come. And I'd like to say thank you to all of our artists. The exhibition has been fantastic. We've been getting wonderful reviews, wonderful notices, and we're thrilled that you're here, and thank you again.
Thank you.
And I should point out, for those of you who are out of town following us on Facebook, if you just go to davidrichardgallery.com, and it's the current exhibition, History, Her Story. You'll be able to see installation images and all the individual images. There's 60 different works. We're featuring 3 of the artists this evening in this lecture. There is a special lecture, as Eva mentioned, next week. And then we're going to have another artist lecture for the other 3 artists on, here, that's why I brought this up with me. July
2 weeks from today.
Yeah, 2 weeks from today. Something's odd here. Anyway, the 19th, July 19th. So anyway, thank you very much, Laura, for agreeing to do this. We appreciate it.
Pleasure. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for being here. And thank you, David Richard. Thank you, New Mexico Women in the Arts. So I thought that rather than give a dry introduction filled with credentials to each of our photographers today, I'd ask you to introduce yourselves. Talk about your relationship with photography, how you came to be a photographer, and a little bit of how you came to New Mexico. So let me reintroduce everyone once again. Kaylee Spitzer, Delilah Montoya, and Laurie Tümer. So Kaylee, why don't you begin?
Okay. I'm originally from northern Canada, Yukon, BC border, and my father's Kaskadena, indigenous to that area. And my mom is Jewish. And I grew up mostly in Victoria, away from my land, which is a lot about what my work is about, which I'll talk about later. I picked up my first camera when I was 12, a little 35mm camera that I loved, and it's been a passion of mine ever since. And I've sought out different people and avenues to learn from, and I love freezing moments in time, and I love being able to get to know somebody through that perspective, and being able to gain trust of someone and allow them to be vulnerable in front of the camera, and being able to show that side of them. So that's what I really adore about it. And I moved to New Mexico originally to go to the Institute of American Indian Arts.
And you graduated?
No, I don't have a degree in anything. And then I moved on to the community college because I was really interested in the darkroom that they had there, and also learning from Will Wilson, who was one of my mentors.
Delilah.
Delilah Montoya, and I teach at the University of Houston in Texas, but my family is from New Mexico, and I always come back. I have a home here, and I have my daughter and my grandchildren are here, and my mother. So I have deep roots here in New Mexico. It's my homeland. So, you know, for that reason, I keep coming back. What brought me to photography? That's, you know, I wanted to be an artist, and I wanted to be a commercial artist, but they didn't want me. So the alternative was, you know, photography. I remember a friend, when I was going to school, one of my classmates, I was just struggling in this commercial art, you know, teacher didn't like me, you know. You've heard that story, right? And she said, well, how are you doing in your other classes? Well, I'm taking photography. How are you doing in photography? Oh, I don't know, I get A's. She goes, well, be a photographer. And I thought, well, the camera likes me, you know. And I think that happens sometimes. It's just the camera likes you. And the images come to you. And so I thought, well, follow that path, right? And so that's kind of what brought me to photography, or photography found me. You know, I guess maybe I have to turn it in the other direction. It kind of found me. And the thing that I liked about photography was that I could get to the images, I could make the images very quickly. So I thought, but as we all know, as you start going into those processes, the processes themselves sometimes become very convoluted, and it takes you longer to make the image rather than drawing it out sometimes, especially when you get into processes like collotypes. At one point, what was it? I was doing these crazy things, because early on, it was all chemical, right? It wasn't digital. And so what I would do is make multiple masks so that I could shoot color onto one piece of film, right? You know, so I could like build. I wanted to make art. I wanted to paint and draw and all of that. And so I did it through photography. And so now at this point, where I'm at is that I understand layers very well because I did it by hand. I made layers by hand. And so the Photoshop made like perfect sense to me because it had layers on it. And I could like build things, and I could build images and do special effects fairly easily. So, you know, that was the sort of thing that I was interested in. Who were my mentors? You know, I would say that when I was at the University of New Mexico, I did come across some really fine professors that kind of helped me along the way. And that would be, you know, Patrick Nagatani would be one of my mentors. You know, I'm thinking of Brad Zorik. I'm thinking, I sat on like in a class of Beaumont Newhall. It was pretty amazing. That was a pretty amazing course. Yeah, but I think more than that was I was very involved with the Chicano movement, and it was the artists and the poets and the photographers within the Chicano movement that really inspired me in terms of what I was looking at, and you know what my subject matters is. So, yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Laurie, can I use that?
Sure.
You're so prepared. So not. Let's see. Well, my name is Laurie Tümer, and I'm originally from Los Angeles. My parents were both born in Los Angeles. I'm a second generation. Hey. And my family, before coming to Los Angeles, they were from the Baltic states. They were basically ethnically cleansed out of the area and dispersed throughout Europe.
And some of them were lucky enough to come here. So that's kind of my background. And let's see. What
How did you arrive at photography?
Oh, when I was a teenager, I got in a lot of trouble. It was the 1960s. And as a punishment, I was sent to modeling school. My parents were sure that they were going to make a lady out of me. And, I was, I think, 13 years old, and I'd already gotten arrested a couple of times. And so...
Oh, this is not the Laurie I know.
I don't know about that. I really just loved what the photographer was doing. I thought what he was doing was the most cool thing, which was taking the pictures, and what I really loved was the contact sheets, and I loved the editing process. I loved recognizing greatness. You know, that feeling of like, that's the one. You know, it's like, what an exciting moment that was for me. I loved that. And it was, you know, I could do that, you know? I could see that I could do that. I didn't know that you could be a doctor or anything else. I didn't know about geology then, but I thought, I think I can recognize greatness. So that was more my motivation for being a photographer. And I took high school classes, and then I went to the University of Arizona as an undergraduate, and I marched into my advisor and said, I want to be a photography major. And they said, well, we don't have a photography department. This was 1970. And I said, but you don't have any photography classes? And they, well, we have two. And they're in the design department. You have to go over there and talk to Les Haas. I don't know if anybody knows who that is. Does anybody know who he is?
Oh, I went to school there.
University of Arizona? Oh, wow.
We'll talk later.
So I marched into Les Haas' office. He sat me down with a pencil and paper, and he said, draw a tree. And I said, well, I don't really draw. And he says, just draw a tree, okay. So I present this stupid-looking tree, like a stick tree, and he says, clearly, you don't know how to draw, and clearly, you cannot be a photographer, and you cannot study photography. Wow. So that's her story. Yeah. I think it's a man's story, too. I think it's a his story, too, but that was in the days when they didn't really have programs for photography. I think I have the distinction of being the oldest person here on the panel. So that's, but a couple years later, tell me if I can just stop, because I probably could go on.
Well, I want to say, can everyone hear?
Yeah.
Yeah?
So a couple years later, as you know now, Tucson, the University of Arizona is a great center for contemporary photography, but in I think it was like 1973, they opened the Center for Creative Photography, and the old bank building on University Avenue. There were vaults where they kept the prints, and then they had stacks, they had books. Well, prior to that moment, I only thought of photography as fashion photography, because that was all I was familiar with. And so I just sat in the stacks, and I looked at these books, and I said, oh, that's the kind of photographer I want to be someday. And that was my beginning. Really, his story. Let me see.
Now, I think, you know, a lot of times when we're talking about photography, technology kind of gets in the way. People get fixated on your process, how you arrived, how you did what you did. In this case, however, I think that all of you use photographic processes in a way that allows us access, that allows us to have more interesting conversations. So let's talk about process, the technologies that you use. They might be photographic technologies, or they might be other technologies. So Delilah, you use a lot of technologies in this current series based on custom paintings.
That's
So
correct.
you've used, I mean, you're using photography, you have audio, you have oral histories from people, so there's audio there. You were doing DNA testing,
Correct.
you're working with QR codes.
Mm-hmm.
What have I forgotten?
Mapping.
I mean, you're bringing a lot together.
Mapping.
Packing it in there, yes.
So
Yeah.
I'm curious about how and why. Like for this particular, because you don't always, you haven't always done this. Like you talked
No.
about the colotypes. You've
Right.
always been very process oriented in a way.
Right, yeah.
For whatever you've worked with, the idea of codices.
The
Plugging
codices are fun.
codices.
Yeah.
You tap into other visual technologies
Right.
such as painting and
Well,
the
you know,
book.
well, the thing is what all of these processes share is my interest in Chicano ideology. And when I talk about Chicano ideology, what I'm talking about is kind of very politically kind of charged way of looking at the world as the idea of mestizaje and mestizo. And in my mind's eye is that, you know, we're not 18th century people. We're 21st century people. And we
Some of
move
us.
through the times with everybody else. But we also have our own way of thinking about the world. And we have our own kind of a history that where I want to do is pull back from that history and move that history forward. And one of the things that I was always very interested in were the Mexican casta paintings, the Latin American casta paintings. And these paintings are like, they come from the 16th and 17th century. They're based on pseudo, or what they thought to be was scientific order, you know, the natural order of things. You know, it's based on categorizing categories, and also it was based on the Enlightenment and the ideas of the Enlightenment. And so what I wanted to do was to reinterpret what was going on with the casta paintings, but in a very contemporary way. And what I wanted to do was use our new technologies, our current technologies in order to do that. So I'm going back, I'm looking at those 16th, 17th century paintings. And in the paintings,
And I'm gonna pass around this book so everybody knows what your reference is to casta paintings.
yeah,
This is
and
a
so
catalog.
the casta paintings were really fascinating in that they were doing this categorizing people, and what was happening in the colonial period of time at that moment was that there was a lot of interracial marriages that were going on. So the races were mixing for the first time. And they hadn't ever seen that kind of mixing before. And so what they were trying to do is they were attempting to give it a structure, or like a social structure. And the social structure was based on a hierarchy that came out of Europe. It was based on a European hierarchy, right? And if you take a look at those pictures, what they do is they actually show families, mother, father, child, right? And each one has a name. So the father is generally Hispanic, so Espanol, mother's Indian, India, and then the child is mestizo. And so they give the child a new name because in their minds it was a new category of person, right? And we know some of these names, mestizo. If a Spaniard married a black woman from Africa, negra, then the child was mulatto. And so we, these names, we know these names, we've heard these names before, so we know this kind of system is kind of moving forward. And so what I wanted to do was to kind of like do kind of a contemporary version of that, but instead of like labeling the way that they did in the Enlightenment period of time, what our new label, of course, then is the DNA testing. And so then what I would do is I DNA test the mother and the father, but what I'm looking for is the old colonial peoples. So who are the old colonial people? That would be our African Americans, our colonial peoples, Hispanics, our colonial people. We have people coming from the 13 colonies, those are the colonial people. So what I did was I asked colonial families if they were willing to DNA test and allow me to go into their houses and photograph them. So of course, and then all the technology starts coming forward, right? So DNA testing. And then if I'm going into their homes, then there would be me bringing in my camera. But it's not just one shot that you're looking at multiple shots. There's a lot of layers, so there's an hour there of me photographing. So like for instance, what was happening here in the foreground wasn't necessarily happening in the background at the same time. That's another moment. So all the different moments get placed together, and the idea was because the painters are able to make compositions and they can place things where they want to place things. And I thought, well, now with our new technology, I should be able to do that. So I'm kind of making this photographic painting of sorts. What I did was I did my own lighting, so that's not available light. I brought in all my own lights, and so I set it up like a set, movie set. And I asked the families to be actors in their own lives. You know, so they kind of acted out what it was that they did as a family, right? Because those Costa paintings, if you look at those early Costa paintings, they're genre studies. And I felt, well, this would be our contemporary way of getting at a genre study, right? Because we are now in an environment where everybody understands what a movie set is. We've watched enough film, we've watched enough TV, we've watched enough, so that if you ask somebody to pose or do this, they automatically know what it is that you want them to do because they've watched it for the duration of their lives.
So now tell us about the soil sample. So I like that you've got this stratification here.
Right.
There's different colors of soils here. Right. Which seems to on the surface relate to skin tone. So a racial hierarchy, a racial stratification, which is exactly what the Costa paintings were about. Right. Class, gender, race.
Exactly.
And in a very kind of formulaic way, you've done
the
stratification of the land here.
Right. Yeah. And
so
what I'm using.
How does that come in?
What I'm doing is I'm using the different colors of the soil to represent the different ethnic groups that is contained in one of the DNA, either the mother or the father. So what you're looking at here in this case is the mother's. Okay, so families have gotten complicated. Families don't necessarily. I mean, your mother, father, child usually, doesn't happen all the time. So when I get introduced to a family, sometimes it's okay. That's the husband and wife, right? But their children are from different marriages. And so, I'm asking for really personal stuff, so I usually let them tell me how they want me to provide the DNA. And she says, well, I want my son DNA tested, but her son came from her first husband. And then, of course, he wants his son DNA tested, and his son came from his first wife. And so you have two sons, one from the matriarch side and one from the patriarch side. The interesting thing is their DNA is almost identical. Which I found really interesting. The husband's first son, well, his first wife was from Texas. She was the Tejana, right? His second wife was from Brazil, right? And she married, her first husband was a Texan who was probably German. And of course, he's a Texan German as well. So when you get the samples back, they are almost identical. Which I found really interesting. Right down to, so this is Mediterranean, Northern European, Southwest Asian, usually follows the Northern European. This one right here is Native American, and then below that is Sub-Saharan, which is African.
And the amount of the sand is the amount of that nationality that they are?
Wow. Of the percentage. Right. So that when you take a look at that, then you just pretty much get a bar graph of what their past is like. And my idea was that with colonial people, the longer you're in the United States, the longer you're in the Americas, the more racially mixed you will become. And there it is. Out of the 9 regions that National Geographic has identified, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the regions.
What's the source of the soil?
it's sand. And what I did was I went around looking for different colored sand, and I found them in New Mexico. Yeah, all except for the black sand that came from Costa Rica. But the rest of it came from New Mexico.
So Kaylee,
Yeah.
so your work begins with a 19th century process, the tintype. And then it becomes married with the ultimate print is a digital. So talk about the appeal of the tintype and maybe explain the process that you use.
Tintypes are new for me. I learned how to do them 2.5 years ago and I've always been really interested in wet plate process, where I first saw it with Sally Mann when I was quite a bit younger. She did a lot of ambrotypes, which are beautiful if you haven't seen them.
What's an ambrotype?
So, okay, I'll back up. It's called wet plate collodion process, and if you do it on glass, it's an ambrotype, and if you do it on aluminum, it's a tintype. But it's pretty much the same process. So I've chosen to do them on aluminum. I break things sometimes, so that seems safer to me as well. But it's called the wet plate collodion process because it needs to stay wet for the entire time. Here in New Mexico, you have about maybe a 15-minute window because it's quite dry. And I'll take a piece of aluminum and cut it into 8x10 sheet, which will fit into my 8x10 camera. And it has a black coating on it. And that's the big difference between the glass and the aluminum. And so I'll coat it, you hand pour emulsion on it and make it light sensitive in the darkroom. And then take it to either outside where your sitter is or inside in the studio where all of these were taken. Make the exposure, go back to the darkroom and develop it. And it's technically a negative. And if you were to do it on clear glass at that point, then you would see that it's a negative. And then you pour the fix on it and it becomes a positive, if you will, because there's a black coating on it. But the image is still reversed. So if there's any writing on a shirt or something like that, you'll see that it's flipped. And so, yeah, on Sasha's shirt, you can see that it's flipped, which I think lends to the.
And where she wrote, is that a tattoo? Or
It's
did she write
writing.
victim on there? So she wrote it.
That was her idea.
In
Sharpie.
In reverse.
She wrote it in reverse.
Well, we wrote it the regular way first and then realized.
So she has a big difference crossed off.
Yeah.
So this process cannot be done in color?
No.
No.
Well, not to my knowledge, but I haven't studied it at length.
No, it can't be done in color.
Hand color.
Hand, that's it, maybe hand color. You can't get three, you'd have to get 3 layers of.
So how do you get a different size?
Yeah.
So I scan the tintype after. I don't know who asked the question. I look at. And then I scan it at really high res, so they're actually like 2 to 3 gigabyte files. And then I'm digitally printing, which I'm not very versed in Photoshop or digital printing or anything from that world. So that's been a steep learning curve that I'm still learning about for sure. But that's also a big draw, at least for me, to do ambrotypes next, because you can make a contact print in the darkroom, and then you get to skip any digital aspect at all, which is really appealing to me.
Where are the original tintypes? The tintype is one of a kind.
I want to build a wall.
Oh, in the corner.
And how many have you done today?
Oh, I don't know. Well, I was learning, so I would take quite a few. So I have like 4 or 5 big binders. Well, I don't know, a couple hundred.
And are your subjects, do you know them all? Or are there some people you don't know?
No, I know them all. I feel like for the work that I do, and not just with the tintype portraits, but I really want people to be able to trust me, and also for me to trust them. And I feel like I need to know the person I'm photographing for that to happen. And I want people to be able to feel safe and express themselves and be vulnerable if they want to, and bring whatever they want to into the photograph. So I think that's important to have some sort of connection that's deeper than just knowing each other in passing. And most of them are friends. My mom is
So
over
your mom,
there.
can you talk about that one a little?
Yeah.
I mean, that must be, there's a very important dynamic that happens in portraiture, and I imagine that one was quite a bit different.
It was a really lovely experience. My mom had breast cancer and cancer in her lymph nodes quite a long time ago and had a bilateral mastectomy. And she's an incredibly strong woman in every aspect of her being. And I really, no judgment at all, but appreciated that she never got any reconstructive surgery. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but it was just nice for me to see her feel comfortable in her skin after. And I wanted to focus on her scars for the image, but I had forgotten how shallow the field is for the lens. And so I chose her face to be in focus, and she wore that bear claw that's a gift, and I think that makes her feel strong, and just really allowed me to see her bare and how she is. And afterwards, she was like, "Oh my God, I have that many wrinkles." Because the lens really breaks it up. Yeah, and she likes it a lot. So that's also important to me, is that the person feels good about their image and feels strong and feels like it's representing them correctly. So that's.
Can you talk about the audio files that go along with the images?
Yeah. So I asked. Not everybody wanted to do a voice recording, but a lot of the imagery is about. I feel like I have to back up to explain it a little bit. I wanted to create a safe space for people to be seen and heard the way they want to be. And also to bring forth minorities, which a lot of these people are Indigenous or mixed, not everybody, but as Indigenous women or trans people, we're often overlooked. And there's a lot of violence that's committed on us, and I think that that's because, unfortunately, some people don't look at people that are different than them as human. And so I wanted to make this space where people felt really safe and that they were seen and heard exactly the way they wanted to be. So I made these really large-scale portraits that the viewer is encouraged to look right at the person. And then I also asked the people that I photographed if they would like to make voice recordings, which if people wanted a guideline for that, I gave a loose guideline, and if they wanted to do something different, then they did. And it was a space to talk about identity or just to tell a story that they wanted people to hear. So the show really, for me, and I think the people in it, is about people hearing and seeing them for who they are.
How does one hear these?
So we usually have an iPad set up here, and you can come in here. Or at the end of the evening, if you want to give me your email, I will send you the link, because we can't. SoundCloud rejected them, and some of the others, based on some of the conversation. So I have them in a playlist that I can send you a link to, and then you can listen to them all. They're all in one playlist. But they are incredible.
I was really moved by how much all of these people gave of themselves, and like anybody can come in here and see this, and I'm very protective of where they go if it's not a gallery. I don't like them to go on social media and things like that without permission, but I'm floored at how vulnerable people made themselves, and eternally grateful for that. And you can really hear that in the voice recordings, and I cried when I listened to all of them.
Have you ever done a self-portrait?
That was the first one I did, but I don't put it in any shows.
Personal?
No, actually, I let that one go on social media because the Northern Journal, which is out of Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, just did a short story on it, and it's the front. I don't know if you call it cover because it's on the website, but that's the first image that you see. And I did a voice recording for myself when I was driving by myself, but I haven't shared it with anybody.
While you were driving, you did?
Yeah.
Hey, Laurie, I had one other question. question about the visual aspect of these. Did you do, so a lot of them, the backgrounds and what have you, are quite variable. Some are real rough, some are a little smoother. Is that just an inherent part of that process, the tintype, or is there some manipulation or other things that you did to kind of vary the aesthetic?
I didn't manipulate them at all. It's the chemistry, and I did have somebody critique me once that said you need to learn how to make a perfect tintype, because this is which I then did, and didn't, well, not I shouldn't say perfect, but was able to make a tintype without, a lot of people call them oysters, the chemicals in the background.
Is that what these are?
Yeah, and I didn't get, people didn't like it as much.
They're delicious.
Yeah.
No, that's what I like is the variability. I think the variability really adds quite a bit, especially when you see them in mass like this.
Yeah.
So it really adds a lot of, you know, variation and what have you. So no, I like them.
I've definitely been pleasantly surprised, like all these little streaks on that one. I didn't know it was going to come out like that, and I thought it was really fitting, as well as on Bianca's eye. She was having a pretty hard time, and it looks almost like a tear coming down, which is quite fitting to her emotion.
There's an element of chance that's so beautiful about it.
Yeah.
That I think that visual effect is important.
One more in the back here?
Yes.
Did you give them any instruction about what you were trying to evoke from your portrait, or did they just say, this is how I want to look?
I don't know. I don't think there was much instruction. I think as I got further into the project and realized my idea became more tangible of what I was trying to do, I would talk about it with people, but it's really what they wanted, or if they just moved a certain way and asked them to stay still, you know? I'm not very good at directing people, so no, there's not a lot of direction.
These are really long exposure times, aren't they?
They're really fast, and it's a lot of light, and it's really bright and a bit jarring.
Yeah. So how long do they have to stay still?
Well, I'll ask them to stay still and focus the camera, and then kind of relax, but remember where they were sitting, go pour the plate, come back, refocus, and then stay still for about 3 seconds while maybe more like 6, while I put the plate in and take the dark side out.
So it's about a 6-second exposure then?
No, it's just popping the strobes, and I just use like a cup as a...
Oh, so you're
shutter.
popping strobes?
That helps.
I did photograph my friend and her baby, and that was a lovely challenge.
So we've talked about chemistry a few times already, which is a perfect segue to Laurie, a different relationship to chemicals. I mean, first of all, there's a piece in the show which is a quotation of what's called the first photograph, and it's a Niepce photograph. And you've talked about that, like the sort of chemical history of that, and how that relates to your own explorations of chemical sensitivities. So can you elaborate on that, this series called Glowing Evidence and process?
Okay. Well, the series came out of a close encounter with pesticides, where I had a major exposure. I had already had a compromised immune system, and it just really took me down. And my house was commercially sprayed with something that was a chemical. I ate organic food, I had an organic garden, thought I was really, aware. And somebody came by and said, I had called a company and said that I seen swarms of what looked like termites going into the corner from outside, and they said it's probably termites, and we use a very safe crushed chrysanthemums. And I said, well, I'll think about it. And 2 weeks later, they just showed up at my door with a work order, and they said we came all the way from Albuquerque, and it's so safe, you could flip it off the floor and that sort of thing. And I was eating a sandwich, and he said, you can walk around with us while we spray it outside. And all my doors and windows were open, and they were spraying them here and there in the trees. And I was chatting around, you know, I'm kind of chatty these days, and I'm just chatting away, and about a half an hour later, bam, I was just so sick. And the next year I was in and out of hospitals and just staying with friends who took care of me, and it took me a year to kind of get back on my feet. But while I was convalescing, I was thinking, well, what if I could see the invisible, and how would I visualize it? So I had this little sketchbook, and I'm like trying to figure it out and doing some research, but it was kind of before the internet almost, you know, it's like, it was hard to find information. And eventually I went to a meeting, and I stood up and told my story, and this guy came up to me with a folder, and in the folder, he said, just take this, and there might be something of interest, you know, to you. And I opened the folder, and there was this article about this environmental scientist by the name of Richard Fensky out of the University of Washington, Seattle, who works with farm workers who use pesticides. And he developed a training program using a fluorescent dye. So he puts the fluorescent dye into the chemicals. The guys go out into the field, and they do their spraying, they come back in, he puts them in a darkened room with UV light, and takes pictures of them and videotapes them, and then he shows them the pictures. And what they reveal is that even though they're wearing headgear, you know, like, you know, goggles, and, you know, all kinds of, you know, bodysuits, they're still getting exposures on their faces. And so Fensky's research is really about dermal exposure, and that most of our exposure to chemicals or to pesticides is through our skin. I always thought it was through your nose, you know, but it's really through your skin. And that's what his research is about. And so when I saw these images, I just went crazy. I went, that's it. That's how I can tell this story, you know, and how I can visualize the invisible. So I contacted him, and he sent me a bunch of slides, and I said, I'm an artist. He said, you can use my images in your work. You can call it your own. I went, oh, what a cool guy. So when I brought a little show and tell. So the very first image I ever made was his image. This was his. And I put my name on it, total appropriation, but he agreed to it, and he thought it was cool. And I thought, well, this isn't really working for me. You know, I gotta up the ante here a little bit. So I started to, and at this point, I didn't realize that I could actually apply the tracers myself. So I was trying to figure this out, and I made this image right here behind you of the farm worker. And it's really a composite of his imagery. And my friend Jerry Friedman over here partly is our dad too. He's the guy you can see that doesn't have the tracer on. So that was the first thing I did, is I started to build these. And I had the question, well, what if I could see the invisible and the visible in the same frame? Like, how do I do that? So I always feel like I felt like I was on a hunt, you know, it's like for how to do something. And I thought of those little winky blinky things you find in the Cracker Jack boxes. And I thought, well, they're so small, you know, can I make them really big? And so I got on the internet, and I met all these people, and they gave me all these directions on how to do it. And it took me about a year, but I learned how to make them. And so then I learned that I actually could apply the tracers with water, because ultimately it really is a simulation. It's not really, it's just, it's for training. And really what Fensky's training them to do is to not only be more careful, but they have to do a really elaborate cleanup when they go home. They can't touch their families. and they have to clean their kids' toys 3 times a day with ammonia, which neutralizes this. They have to do so much to keep themselves more or less safe that those brochures were doing nothing. But as soon as he started to implement this tracer dye safety demonstration worldwide, the people who are using pesticides got it. So I thought, whoa, that's like every artist's dream, that it would make such an impact, you know? So I thought, well, okay, he sent me tracer materials, and that's when I started to apply the tracers myself. But there's no application of tracers in here. These are all simulations. So
what about the lenticular print? So you mentioned that that's the little thing that comes in the Cracker Jack box. So
how do I do it?
How do you do it, and why does it feel like the appropriate medium for your message?
Well, because motion is our sense, our greatest sense that gives us an indication of danger. Like, that's why our eyes are the way they are. And so I thought that was really appropriate because they're moving images. And people stand in front of them way longer than a normal still image. I thought that works conceptually, and that just is perfect, you know. So that was it. So this is, everybody always wants to know what they look like. They're, the images are basically, like, I just have 2 images in one, like here's one. This is what it looks like as a print. It's kind of hard to read, isn't it? Because there are 2 images. But once you put the lens on it, this is an optical grain lens that gets laminated onto the image. This isn't actually, it's the pitch of this lens is not going to match the pitch of this picture, because that has to be calibrated with the people who make this. I mean, it's a long process. It took me a long time to learn it. But anyway, once you laminate it, like more or less here, this will be like a really not a clean flip, as they say. But when you do this, more or less, you can see the flip. I don't know if you can see that. Can you see it more or less? I'm not really winding it up.
Turn it this way, Laurie.
This is like a bad flip. This would be considered something you would throw away, you know. But that's kind of more or less how it works. So these are, it's an optical grade lens, and they're convex. And so for each one of these little, they're called lenticles, you have both of those images sliced together. So you have an AB, 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 AB. Wow. If you have 2 images, if you have 10 images, you've got one A, B, C, D, under one lenticle, which obviously you need a little bit bigger lenticle for 10 images. Does that make sense? Yeah. Does it?
Sort of.
Sort of.
How do you split the image? How do you split the image like this?
Well, you can it's called interlacing the image. I don't know if you can see the lines. You can
And is that done in Photoshop?
You can do it in Photoshop, but there's software that I use called Superflip, and that's the software that dices and slices the image right there. And then you work with the people who actually manufacture the lens so that you can get like a number to put into the Superflip software so that the pitch of the lens, the spacing between the lines, are the same spacing between the lines of your print. So it's really complicated, and you have to anyway, it's complicated. And of every one that you try, maybe every 4 that you try, only 1 really works. So it was a big process, and it was a very physical process, And in many ways, I really never felt I finished this series. You know, I had to stop it because I just couldn't do it physically anymore because it was so demanding to apply the tracers, which had to be at night. And then I was lucky to have Hector, who's here, who's my assistant and friend, who helped me towards the end of the project, applying the tracers in the garden with the lights and UV lights and all that. So it's a really large body of work, and this is a very small part of it.
Laurie, is that to create a mystery?
Well, when the farm workers get into that room where they're showing pictures of themselves and videotapes, the image is so abstract and so weird that first they laugh. It's like, because it's funny. And then it hits them what this is about. So also, I wanted that sense of fun. I wanted that winky blinky thing happening in that same way, that laughing, you know, that feeling of ha-ha, you know. And I remember the writer, the great Jim Sagal, I don't know how many of you know his writing. He used to say that the way that you teach people is you trick them. And you trick them with humor, and you know, and so it's kind of that too.
So a number of years ago, you had mentioned that conversations had started at a previous event about that your images are beautiful, but the subject is so ugly.
I know.
And the complete contrast to that. Can you talk about that a little bit? And it sounds like you've thought about that many times over the years.
I know. Laura was at the museum then, and there was a big crowd. It was like a big auditorium. I was so scared. And this guy, he just practically attacked me. And he said, "How could you be making such a beautiful image of something so ugly?" And my friend Jerry said, "They're not so beautiful."
Well, look at that funny looking guy over there.
So, where was I?
Beauty versus ugly.
Oh, yeah. So, Laura and I started, I mean, I was like destroyed the next day, and Laura was so sweet. She sent me an email. I was like, who was that guy? And we started this dialogue about beauty, and she said, you know, beauty is a carrier for art. I think that's what you said. And it's like, you know, it's nothing if it's not beautiful. I mean, I don't remember exactly. I tried to find it because I thought I would read it today because it was funny, but in a way funny. But anyway, that was nice. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And I mean, I think that it sounds like that question has provoked a lot of thought for you.
Yes.
And that it shouldn't have been a negative thing. But,
Can you say what he was referring to? What was the image?
It might have been the farm worker. I don't know. I showed slides, right?
he was talking about an ugly, just the ugliness of the
subject. Yeah. I mean, basically, these are illustrations of things that I've learned about pesticides and contaminants over the years, and really, I've learned like way more than I wanted to learn. You know, it's like I know more than I really want to learn about just the pervasiveness of it and how it's really everywhere. And I made an installation once called "Calling Ahead," where I have to call and see if people spray pesticides in their places of business, you know, or the grocery store, or the gallery, or the, you know, wherever. And it was a series of phone calls, and like nobody knew what they were spraying. Oh yeah, we spray once a month. What do you spray? I don't know. I'll find out. I'll call you back. And it's like it was one call after the next call after the next call, and it was like just the realization of, wow, they really don't know. We don't really know. We're so cavalier about this, you know. And I forgot my train of thought. Sorry.
that's good. I think you answered.
Did I? Oh yeah, beauty. I know my great friend here, Sylvia, said the other day, she said, we were talking about this again, because I thought, I think somebody might attack me again. And she said that, tell me what you said.
Well, I related it to the concept of cognitive dissonance, conflicting ideas, and how I learned about it as an educational tool, and how creating that kind of contradictory ideas or images can help enhance learning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's perfect for what I'm doing, exactly. But this guy had a very low tolerance of cognitive dissonance.
So yeah, combining something that's so threatening and unhealthy with yet beautiful images is an example to me of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, it is a cognitive dissonance. And I think a lot of people, I mean, I've heard people say, political art just really turns me off. Because it's like so in my face, and I just don't want to really look at it. And I think, well, maybe the artist either had too much cognitive dissonance, or it's the person, the viewer, him or herself, who has the cognitive. I mean, I don't know. It's like, where's that point? I don't know.
So you bring up an interesting subject of political art. Do you all regard yourselves as political artists? There's ways in which each of you address very highly political subjects. For example, the long sordid history of non-native photographers photographing native subjects. So is your work political?
Yeah. I think I am as a being too, so whenever I make it, kind of, that bleeds into it.
I want to know if you made that fabulous necklace.
I know.
And if you're selling them.
Can you read it?
Of course I can.
My friend Sachi made it. I can give you their information.
Thank you.
Can you tell us what it says?
No, she's not on you.
Never make 1,000.
Exactly. They'll go like hotcakes.
Well, there goes that video on Facebook.
We weren't thinking.
They kicked us off already.
That's a badge of honor. Yeah, Delilah, I don't even need to ask you.
You can edit it.
Yeah, well, that's what I do.
I mean, just even the term Chicana.
Right.
It suggests political activism.
It does. Well, the thing is that that's always been my inspiration for art making. And I think it had a lot to do with, what happens when you're a teenager. And when I was a teenager, this is going to date me, right? It was the 60s and 70s. And I was in Omaha, Nebraska. And the place that I was at was what they called South Omaha. But in North Omaha was right where the Underground Railroad emptied out. Right? So, I mean, all these kind of racial kind of integrations and things like that was happening every day. And the high school that I was going to, there was race riots. And in the North Omaha was burning. And my father was white, my mother's Mexican, and my father joined a militant white group.
Oh my goodness.
And we started bringing these people that were scary. I mean, these people were just freaking scary. So I saw this really very close up, and I saw this kind of racism and the way that my mother was being looked upon and thought about, and when the Chicana movement came around, I mean, I really understood a lot of the issues that were going on there, and so it became this kind of very motivation for me, and once again, it's like it was where the collective poets and photographers and artists and this kind of activism that was coming together, and I found it quite inspiring.
Do you remember what that first moment was when you became aware of the Chicano movement?
Yeah, there was a friend of mine's, and she was, her parents were very involved, and she just kind of pulled me in to it, right? And I'm just kind of like sitting there listening to all of this, and I'm going, yeah, I understand what's going on here. It's dinner conversation. You know, in my household, it was dinner conversation. It was how, you know, our conversations would go. You know, my father would be angry and would tell her that, well, I just pulled you out of the Pickle Street mud, you know, that sort of thing. You're lucky that you're with me, you know. And I remember thinking to myself as a child, like, you're lucky that my mother is even sitting here talking to you. You know, you're the one who's lucky, you know. And eventually they, you know, obviously broke up. They split up. And I think it was, you know, at that point that it was like I began to really feel like it was very important to speak out, you know, and start talking about these issues. And it's been a journey. And I know that as an artist, people have always asked me, well, you're putting yourself in a box. Why do you want to be in such a box, you know, of calling yourself one thing or another, or a Chicana artist? And my feeling is that, and my response is that, you know, I don't feel like I'm in a box. I feel like I'm digging a well. And I haven't hit water yet.
Oh, that's
and I'm still digging this. And I think with this body of work, what I really wanted to talk about was how interracially mixed we all are. And that if you look at it, we do come from East Africa. All of us do. There was one, you know, they trace it to an L3 who walked out of East Africa. So if you walked out of Africa, your E was L3. And we're all related to her. And some of us went to Europe, some of us went into India, some of us went into Asia, and then some of us walked all the way into the Americas. You know, and if you begin to do this like DNA testing, you'll begin to find out how integrated we all are. And really those distinctions are very political. You know, and it takes another political voice to say they're very political. You know, we need to think about this.
Well, they're invented to serve people's interests, completely constructed out of one's imagination, and call it science and the Enlightenment.
Exactly.
But it's not.
Thank you.
Didn't you tell me that of the ones the families you've looked at, that almost all of the colonials had a combination, different degrees, but it was African, Northern European, Indigenous, and Mexican?
Well, indigenous Mexicans are indigenous.
Yeah, no, Mexican indigenous, but I mean,
true integrated, multicultural people. Because Mexicans always have native, Mediterranean, Northern European, Sub-Sahara, Southwest Asian, Northeast Asian, Southwest Asian. You know, they truly are the cosmic race. And you're kind of wondering, like, well, where did the Southwest Asian and the Northeast Asian come from?
The wind. It
comes from the native.
Yeah.
Because the Native Americans, according to National Geographic, I'm going to go back over. According to National Geographic, Native Americans are cousins to the Asians.
Yeah.
But if you speak with, you know, Native groups, Native American groups, they will say that we came from here because our history, our creation stories tell us that we come from here. You know, so that's why, you know, I just say according to National Geographic. You know, our science is never absolute. I mean, they thought they had it in the Enlightenment. They thought they had figured it out, right? But all they were doing was labeling. And maybe all we're doing is labeling. Maybe they haven't figured it out yet. You know, and so what the work that I'm doing is I'm just kind of like throwing that out as a question, because I'm making the comparisons. have we moved away from colonialism that much? How far have we moved from colonialism? Is this just a new colonialism? I don't know, I'm just, you know, a lot of questions, and and I probably learned way more than what I need to. You know, the part that I really found like fascinating is that when that group L3 moved out of, and that's the modern man, what they consider to be the modern man, when the modern man moved out of East Africa.
About like 60,000 years ago.
Yeah, 100,000 years ago. Yeah, when they moved out of East Africa, they encountered other hominins that had already been in like Asia and also in Northern Europe. In Northern Europe, it's Neanderthal. In Asia, it's the Desnovine. The DNA test, and you'll find that like Mexicans, Latinos,
Yeah.
right, usually have Neanderthal and Desnovine, both inside of them. How does that happen? It's because 3 million years ago, species cannot interbreed with each other unless they have a common ancestor. So that means 3 million years ago, we had a common ancestor with the Desnovine and the Neanderthal. There was another Eve.
I was never so excited as when I found out that I'm 4% Neanderthal. A very disparaged group before we recognized that they interbred with other folks.
How many people have had a DNA test and done that?
Carrie, I'm curious as to whether you feel that your heritage has hindered you or enabled you, or neither. Yes.
Can you say that again?
I was wondering if you feel that your heritage that we've been similarly been hearing about, has it enabled you, or do you feel it's hindered you in any way, or do you feel it's been not a question at all?
It's just who I am, and I celebrate it and work with it when hardship comes from it. But I wouldn't say that it's hindered me or enabled me, because it's what I live every day. So I just don't look at it with that point of view.
More a modern woman.
You know, can you talk about, you mentioned we're from here, and you went back up to British Columbia.
Oh.
And you did a project on your elders,
Mm-hmm.
and you learned how to hunt and fish and trap and do beadwork. Did you do yours, by the way?
No, with my purse.
Your purse. And work with hides. So, I mean, can you talk about that and how that relates to your photography?
Yeah.
If at all, if it doesn't.
Yeah. My father went to residential school, which in the States I think you more commonly know it as boarding school. So he was raised in the bush. My grandmother raised 17 kids in a tent. And fished and hunted for them all.
In Canada?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. And that's the life that they all knew. And when my father was 5, the Canadian government, along with the Catholic Church, came and took him. I don't know if I need to give background on this or if most people are aware of what happened. Okay. So he was taken at 5 and he never left. And maybe he had gone home for a summer. We've had this conversation. But he ran away successfully when he was 15. And his first language and only language at that point was Casca. And it was beaten out of him, along with, I mean, this is personal things and I don't want it all recorded. And my mom got work down south and we moved. And so I grew up away from my land and a lot of my people, but always knowing where I came from and as much about my culture as I could. And then my parents split up when I was quite young and reunited with family. I don't think I was ever disconnected. And I started to learn how to hunt, how to tan hides, fish, bead, all these things that I feel I should have been able to access. from a really young age. And I was really like a late bloomer. I shot my first and only caribou that I shot when I was 23, I think it was. Whereas my brother was probably 11. And I went up there with the intention to move there permanently. And so there's all of these like kind of breaks in relearning my culture, and a lot of people refer to it as cultural revitalization for our generation. We're trying to relearn what was taken from us, I believe. And it's difficult and it's emotional, and it's also, for me, it's a way of honoring my family and where I come from too. Like, I should know those things. If I have young, little tiny people in my life, I want to be able to teach them those things and pass it on.
Did you know your grandma?
My biological grandmother, yes.
The one who is that grandmother who
My dad.
did all hunting?
Well, in my family, my culture, a lot of people are grandma, auntie, uncle. My biological grandmother, yes, I knew. And she died when I was quite young. And her sister, who I call grandma, who I learned a lot of that with, she's still alive. And she shot the purse that I have.
May we see it? We have to see the purse.
This is my first beating attempt when I was young, so it's not good.
Beautiful.
But she's an amazing woman.
Nice.
Are you still doing rework?
I don't do that often anymore. It's really meticulous. I like it. I'm not very good at it, and it's really time consuming. So I enjoy doing it, but there's other things I've been focusing more on.
I think equally as time consuming, right? Is that pretty time?
Yeah, they're trying.
Time consuming.
I started a pair of uppers for moccasins for my mom. I don't know how many years ago, and they are not done.
So as you were growing up, were you more involved with your Jewish heritage?
My
On your
mom
mom's side?
is an atheist, raised me that way. My grandfather was raised religious and kept kosher and all of that. And I was definitely involved. I went to synagogue when I was young because the rabbi was a woman and was a lesbian. So I was like, yes, we're going. We're and I met a lot of the family friends that were Jewish, so I got little bits of it and bits of the culture. And I've definitely always been around the culture, but my family's not religious on either side, thank God.
There's cognitive dissonance. Thank God my family isn't religious.
So I feel connected to both, but I think that because I grew up away from my father's land, that side of my family's land, I feel really urged to spend time there and to gain more knowledge. And also because we're losing our elders that hold so much of that knowledge, and it's heartbreaking, and it is a race against time. And language is so important for culture, and the English language just doesn't do it. And there are certain stories that you can't tell without your language, and I don't speak my language, and my grandma will just yell at me in my language till she's red in the face and until I understand a little bit. Which I appreciate that tactic.
Is the language being kept? Is it being taught to young people in schools?
She teaches, and all of her kids speak, but she'll speak Tasca to them, and they'll speak English back. And
Does she yell at them too?
Well, won't probably. And all our little dogs.
So is this Rose McDonald?
No.
Okay. Talk about
Myra
that.
Donacy.
Is that part of your elder project?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I have an elder project per se, but just documenting my people and my land and communities that will have me. There aren't my people. But Rose and Maggie, who are in those black and white photos, who've passed now, I felt really shy to photograph them too. I've met them with my dad, who that was the first time I heard him speak Tasca, to tell them that I was his daughter, which was really something. But they were also, by the time I met them, they were going deaf and weren't speaking a lot at all. And so when I met them with my dad, they knew who I was. When I met them with my brother, they knew who I was. And then I just like show up in this truck with just me and a bunch of fruit, because there's no fruit around. I'm like, hey, how's it going? And I felt really shy because on one hand, I feel like they do know who I am, but maybe they don't. And I want to spend time with them, and I don't want to go in there and just take either, you know. So we sat and ate watermelon, and I photographed them. And they're amazing. They've lived off the land their entire lives. Their hands are so arthritic they can't straighten them, and they still chop their own wood, make dry meat, never complain, are just, there's like an innocence and joy that they had that I haven't really encountered before. And I don't know how to access that. And I think that is just from living a different way. And that's not to say they didn't have hardship, because they had hardship that I probably can't imagine. But it's just a totally different way of looking at the world. And I felt really, really privileged to be able to photograph that. But also slightly uncomfortable, because I did kind of feel like a stranger.
It's a beautiful series. You should look at her website to see it. So, no conversation for New Mexico Women in the Arts would be complete without talking about gender. So the question is, how does gender inform or impact your work, if at all? And that might be professionally. Have you had limitations to opportunities? Has it allowed you more opportunities? And also in terms of your subject matter, what you choose to convey in your work, who your subjects are, etc. So, Laurie, do you want to start with that?
Say it again.
Has gender impacted or informed your work? And if so, how?
Well, I would say this work is relevant to men and women, to everyone. I think that when I think of men who are doing kind of environmental work, I try to, I was just thinking about that because you sent me the list of questions, and I was thinking, like, how might this be different than what a guy might do, you know? And so I started thinking of people like Chris Jordan and Will Wilson, and I think that they tend to do wide landscapes and big, vast spaces. And I think, if anything, these are really intimate, more domestic in nature. You know, they're the sanctuary of my home, my body, the sanctuary of my body. And I would say if there is a difference, and maybe there isn't, I may not know may not know of enough people to even make this generalization, but it seems like they're I take pictures of clouds too, and the guys who do it, they go chasing after these big clouds and cars, and and they stand on the big top of the mountain. I take pictures from my window. It's like, it's kind of more interior, or more domestic, I guess you could say, a sense of landscape for me. So, I'm grateful to live in this time as a woman, I'll tell you that. Because I don't think I would be an artist if it were like even 30 or 50, 40 or 50 years ago. And I just don't think it would have happened. I wouldn't have been able to be so independent and been able to just do my own thing and to live in a room of my own, a house of my own, and live life on my own terms. So in that way, it's kind of a crappy time to be living right now, but in some ways, there balances out somehow.
But actually, what I'd like to say is thank you to the New Mexico Women for the Arts. This was an awesome experience, truly awesome, in that you brought together a group of women photographers that I didn't know existed, and you taught me a lot, and I want to thank you for that. Just kind of like bringing me in and just giving me this opportunity to, think about these things. When does this ever happen? And it takes women to make it happen. To pull us all together and just to celebrate all of us. And I'm celebrating you for this. Thank you.
And I think we have to thank David and Richard as well.
Oh, yeah.
As far as the idea of the focus of gender and women, women have always been in photography from early on. And it had to do, here comes the photographer and teacher right now. And it had to do that what women would use photography for, it was like the job inside the home. And many times what they would do is they would pick up the camera and they would make the portraits, or and they found that they could kind of put it down every once in a while and they could pick it back up again. And so photography and women, or the gender, right? Women photographers have always been around since the very beginning. Margaret Julia Cameron, perfect example of that, right? She considered herself to be an amateur photographer, but she was. And what she taught us, and what she taught us as photographers, was intimacy. She was the first one to get that close and to allow the lens to go out of focus. And so what we learned is how you could become intimate with the photographic medium. And and you pointed out, well, you think about men, what they were doing at that time, they were photographing buildings, and they were so sharp and exact and everything, but Margaret Julia, she gave us, a different way of looking and thinking about the photographic medium. Right? And I think that, looking at the work that's in, all of the work that has been brought together, you're our Margaret Julia Cameron. you brought back that intimacy, right? Which is, I love her work. It's beautiful work, and you're the contemporary version of that, right? In terms of my own work, it's really, really, really very difficult to ask a family to do very, very intimate things like I'm asking here. I'm asking, can I go inside your home, right? I want to DNA test you. I want to do a monologue. I want to put it up there. I want to do all of these things, and then the question is that how do I pull it off? How do I do it? Well, people that are comfortable with me, like Christina in the back of the room, she agreed to allow me to photograph her family and walk into her house and all of that. But what I found is that it was the matriarchs. I kept going to the matriarchs. And it was the matriarchs that would pull the family together continually. Right. I would say of the 16 Costa portraits that I did, 14 were pulled together by the matriarch. And one woman that I think, comes to mind, I asked her, I actually stalked her. It was horrible. The things I did. I stalked her, and she finally, gave in. And she had a family of 5 daughters, and she brought in all of her grandchildren and her grandsons. It was a full table dinner that she put together. And she got them all there because she was the matriarch and decided she wanted to have this done. Right? It was the matriarch that made it happen. Because what was, you know, what I'm talking about, they saw as being very important. That it was, you know, we talk about the invisible and the visible, right? And that was part of the invisible. And it was the matriarchs that decided that we need to make this visible. We need to know, we need to see how connected we all are. We need to see our, you know, what the DNA says. You need to see, when you look at the families, I find that people, when they look at this, there's aspects in it that they relate to. And, oh yeah, you know, we have that coffee table, or we have that tablecloth, just like that one. You know, that's our tablecloth too. You know, so it was, all of these things start kind of like relating, and so, you know, we began to feel the humanity in it. And really that's what I was thinking about. And also began to think about race and how race is being designed, right? That it's manufactured, you know, and that's one of the things that I wanted us to, you know, a person to kind of walk away with also is that idea of manufacturing. But it was the matriarchs, so I have to tip my hat to the matriarchs.
You want to be our last word?
Sure. I'm going to talk about gender in terms of my work, and I think gender can be a complicated thing for some people to understand and accept, because I don't think there's two. And so almost everybody in my work is either non-binary, trans, or a woman, and I feel like women run my world. Like, I was raised by a single mom. My partner is a woman, and most of my subject matter are women, or identifying as women, or trans. And I have just, I don't know, it doesn't even, my friend Meredith and I were talking about this today when we were driving, because it was the one question that I didn't really know how to answer, even though I feel really passionately about it. And it doesn't seem like a choice to me. It was just my natural instinct. And I also think that right now in this time, it's really important to give space for women, trans people, non-binary people, people that are underrepresented, and that shouldn't be. And I have photographed 2 men. And they're both people that I adore, that I feel really comfortable with, that I think, well, I know one is a radical feminist because they portray themselves that way, and the other person is a feminist too. And that's also really important to me. And they hold the women in their life up so high and support them so well and appreciate them. And see, I don't quite know what to say about it. But
I see your portraiture, and it feels to me like you're reclaiming a space for your subjects.
Yeah, I'm trying to. And I think that as a woman in this world, it is harder. But that's not something that ever stops me, and I'm definitely not blind to that. And we know that men, even if they're not as qualified, will get the job often over a woman. And we know about this inequality, but I feel, I just feel like I've tried to run right through it. And that also kind of lends to the fact that I feel that I'm educated, but I don't have any like proof of that. I don't have any pieces of paper, so yeah, oh, I think so. But a lot of people don't think that, you know. And also, even though people do hold credentials really high, then women that have credentials still aren't given the same opportunities, so why the fuck go get them? You know?
Let me think.
Are there any questions that anyone